Liz, you ready? Call to order the Wednesday, April 12th, 2023 Chaska Planning Commission. Liz, would you take a roll?
Commissioner Urbanski,
Here.
Olson,
Here.
Gorey,
Here.
Here.
Austin,
Here.
Purdy,
Here.
Kerber,
Here.
Campbell, and Chairperson Brass.
Here. Then we'll move on to adopt the agenda. Would anyone like to make a motion?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda adopted. Here is the visitor presentation. This would be for anything not on the agenda. If someone's here tonight that would like to speak to the Planning Commission that's not already on the agenda. I guess we should check Zoom, or we're still doing Zoom.
I don't see anyone on Zoom.
Okay, when no one's here, then we'll move on to approve the previous meeting minutes. Everyone had a chance to review those. Anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve the meeting minutes from the previous meeting.
First by Purdy.
Second.
Second by Baswa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And item 6, consent items. Recommend approval of the final plat for Oak Creek, second edition, DR Horton, PC number 2023-11. It's in the packet, if everyone had a chance to review it. Are there any questions or discussions we'd like to have at this time? I don't see anything with that. Would anyone like to make a motion for potential approval?
So moved.
First by Commissioner Urbanski,
Second.
second by Gorey. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And that would lead us right into action item 7A. Liz, if you would do your deal.
Thank you, members of the Planning Commission. We have a variance request in front of us this evening as our first action item. This is for the property known as 1142 Rosemary Lane in regards to a variance request from the Bavaria Road setback. And this is being proposed by the property owner, Jimmy's son. So the property in question is in the aerial above. It's highlighted in blue on this exhibit. The property is located kind of on the north sides of Chaska, off of Bavaria Road, so it does have direct abutment to Bavaria Road on the rear portion of the site. The front orients off of Rosemary Lane, and this is a part of a collective development known as Nickel Creek. So some existing conditions of the property. The zoning out there is within a PRD district, so PRD 53 to be exact, so that stands for Planned Residential Development. There are setbacks established with that PRD. The one notable this evening is the Bavaria Road setback, which was established with the PRD 53 zoning. That setback does require 125 feet from the center line of that roadway. I also want to note that there is an exception or a separate regulation for attached decks, which allows the setback to be 115 feet from the center line of Bavaria Road. So essentially, if the house is built up to 125, the deck can go into that rear setback up to 10 feet. So the Nickel Creek 4th edition that this property is a part of was platted in 2013, so just 10 years ago. This property in particular is 0.27 acres in size, which amounts to 11,823 square feet if we need a reference back for any reason on that. The site or the lot currently contains a single-family home, a garage, a small shed, and an attached deck. And where the house sits and the deck sits today, the deck is currently at 115 feet from the center line of Bavaria Road, and the house is approximately 127 feet away from the center line of Bavaria Road. So the rear portion of the house backs up to Bavaria Road, and the classification of Bavaria Road, which is dependent on the setback established out there, it is currently classified as a major collector road. However, in our 2040 comprehensive plan, it does guide this section of roadway to be upgraded as an arterial roadway as the city continues to develop within our own community, but also surrounding communities continue to grow. So arterial roadways have a 125-foot centerline setback established to them, and hence why that 125-foot setback is established on this section of roadway. Wanted to provide a couple photos of the property, just so you have a real visual of what exists out there today. Most of the photographs are taken from the rear portion of the property or from the portion owned by the city that directly abuts their property. So as you can see, they have an attached deck that comes off the back side of the house there, and where it sits today is right up to the center line setback that is allowed for decks. And the reason I want to show those photographs is the request that they are speaking to this evening would essentially ask for a rear building addition that would follow the footprint of where the rear attached deck exists today. So they essentially want to add on a building addition that would come out to the extent of where the deck sits today. So what they would be asking for would be a variance from section 15.28-100A, which is setbacks from principal roadways in the zoning ordinance. There's a section on minor arterial classified roads, which is 125 feet from the center line. And within that, Bavaria Road, north of Pioneer Trail, is listed under that setback requirement. And then under that, and just for reference, setbacks for attached decks shall be 10 feet less than the requirement for buildings. So again, they would like to construct a rear building addition to their existing home for an underground sport court. They'd like to locate that building addition below the existing deck's general footprint, so essentially coming out to the southerly extent of that deck and where it sits today. So essentially what that amounts to is a deviation of 12 feet into the Bavaria Road setback, or in other words, 113 feet from the center line of Bavaria Road. Want to note what the applicant's statement is for hardship or practical difficulty. They would like the indoor gym space that's needed for their family to promote a healthy lifestyle, provide a space that would reduce community exposure, and support mental and physical health within their family. They state that similar-sized homes and lots in their neighborhood and throughout the city are not as restrictive as theirs regarding rear setbacks. They also state that practical alternatives do not exist to add on to the home. They opted to follow their existing deck footprint, not desk, footprint, to locate the deck, or to locate under the deck to minimize the impact on the surrounding area. The proposed location that they've delineated out for their addition would not require significant costs that would include modification or movement of an exterior wall. And then building under the deck and in the back of the home, they believe is the least invasive, least impactful effect on their neighbors as well. So wanted to show the existing survey of the property. So this shows where the house sits, as well as the attached deck and the outline of that. Again, the setback of the deck is essentially at 115 feet from the center line of Bavaria Road. And this general area is kind of what they were looking at for the extent of their building addition. So the proposed addition is shown on this slide, which again would follow the southerly extent of the attached deck and then kind of round out to the back portion of their attached garage. So in some regard, they are asking to kind of go out and back up to the garage, kind of past where the deck currently sits today, but that would help kind of round out the building addition for what they're showing. And the calculation or value, again, of where that proposed addition would sit would be 113 feet from the center line of Bavaria Road, so a 12-foot deviation from the required setback. Also wanted to show their proposed elevations for this request. So again, the building addition would come out to the extent of the deck. So what you would see on the back side would be a portion of siding up to the height of where the deck sits today. And then a majority of the building addition would be underground, roughly 15 feet underground, to accommodate the gymnasium function. And then a side view of that, what it would look like from the side, adding on additional vinyl siding to match with the house, and then have the deck basically sit on top of that building addition to the extent to the back of the attached garage there. So getting into the variance facts and what we use to evaluate variances, our current ordinance speaks to undue hardship. Minnesota state statute speaks to practical difficulty. Generally speaking, they're one and the same. However, practical difficulty has a little bit different of a spin on its definition, and I have included that below here. So to grant a variance per ordinance and state statute, you do have to meet the requirement for practical difficulty on a property, which speak to unique characteristics that are present on the property that are not created by the property owner or are created of natural ascent. So I kind of want to read this just because it speaks to the criteria that we get into with a variance application. So speaking to the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner that is not permitted by the zoning ordinance. The plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner, and the variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality of which it locates in. Economic considerations alone shall not constitute an undue hardship if reasonable use of the property exists under the terms of the ordinance. So these are the questions we ask and have the applicant use as a part of their narrative and analysis of a variance request. I'm not going to go over all of them, as all of them will kind of speak into the findings that we've come to at the end of our report. So I do want to get into those as to how we evaluated the variance request and came to the conclusion of a recommendation of denial on the request. So the first finding, the property in question can be put to reasonable use under the current regulations and setbacks. The property currently has a home, attached garage, and accessory shed on the property. There are no apparent unique physical restraints or constraints on the property, which would put the applicant in a position of not reasonably using their property per this request. And when we speak to physical constraints, we're talking about anything unique to the property that would really set it apart from its neighboring properties. So this property, compared to its other neighboring properties, really is no different in the way that it's set up. It doesn't have unique characteristics like a wetland or wooded steep slope on it that would otherwise preclude it from being able to meet the ordinance. So that's what we speak to when we talk about unique physical characteristics of a property, and if there's anything that really sets it apart compared to other neighboring properties. Variance is greater than necessary to reasonably use the property, since indoor sport courts are not a necessary use on a single-family property. A reasonable alternative could be an outdoor sport court or a building addition that meets the setbacks. So there currently is space on the building that could meet setbacks. And when we speak to the setback that is applied out there and why it is applied, it's not only just a precaution on improvements that could be made to the actual road that the setback is applied to, but it's also a safety piece in terms of these major roadways having to have certain separation from livable areas or areas that are contained with people that are living there. So it is a safety precaution to ensure that there is enough separation between the roadway and a building for this matter. So in this regard, the regulation itself that prevents the property owner from complying with the applicable code section is really what they're saying is the practical difficulty, but it's not something that's unique to the property itself, which is kind of the crux of a variance application in general, is showing that there are unique characteristics on the property that preclude it from meeting the ordinance. And in this case, with the first two findings there, we didn't see those physical constraints on the property applicable to this request. And then the third finding, the variance, if granted, will alter the essential character of the area. A rear building addition encroaching into the minimum building setback would set a negative precedence for other homes along Bavaria Road and alter the essential character of the area. And also, just getting to the safety component of the necessity of why that setback is in place. And then fourth and final finding, the variance, if granted, is contrary to the city's comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance, which classifies Bavaria Road as a minor arterial and thus requires a 125-foot centerline setback. With that, due to the findings that we've have provided, we are asking you to make a motion to recommend denial of a variance request to encroach into the Bavaria Road setback 12 feet that they're requesting for the purpose of a building addition that would include a sport court per section 15.28 100A of the zoning ordinance, and then based on the findings that are listed on the last slide, as well as what are listed in your staff report, as well as the arguments and the findings and the analysis that was also included as a part of the staff report and what we've stated this evening. This is a public hearing, so that'll be kind of the next course of action, but if things move forward this evening, I do want to note that the city council date attached with this request would go to April 17th, again, if it moves forward this evening. Happy to answer any questions. We do have the applicant and property owner in the audience to help answer questions as well.
All right, thanks, Liz. I have a quick question. For some reason, I'm blanking. Because it's just a variance request here, if it is denied, does it still go to city council or does it just stop here?
Yes, it does,
It
because you're
does,
making
yep.
a recommendation.
Yep, that's what I thought.
Yep.
Okay, just wanted to
You're either
make sure.
recommending denial or you're recommending approval
Okay.
for it to continue to
City
city.
council would still have their say on it.
Correct,
Okay.
yep.
Thank you. So back to the commission here. It is a public hearing, so we'll open it up shortly. But first, if there's talk amongst yourselves, questions for staff.
One question. If they were to put in an outdoor sport court in the backyard, what are the setbacks on that?
The setbacks would be the regular patio setbacks, essentially. So it would have to meet the 5-foot side setback, and then it would have to stay out of easements in the backyard, which I believe they have close to a 20-foot, well, actually, I can pull it up here, or a 17-foot easement on the back patio, or on the back property line there, so it would have to stay out of that. So a 5-foot side, and then 17 feet on the rear property line.
Okay.
Hey Liz, for Bavaria Road's classification, what was it in the 2030 comp plan? Because we referenced the 2040, but what was the 2030 comp?
The
plan?
2030 had the same classification for it, yep.
So does that mean they're potentially going to widen Bavaria into 2 lanes each way?
I mean, there's always potential for that for any type of roadway. We don't have any impending plans right now to do that to that section of road. But I think the way the city evaluated it is that there is space in other neighboring communities that are continuing to grow and use that section of roadway. And therefore, that larger setback was applied to it, and that classification was applied to it.
I can provide a little additional context. So this section of Bavaria Road is kind of an interesting section. If you head southward, you run into the roundabout, and then there's a portion that is actually county road. That's part of the east-west corridor that's primarily Pioneer Trail. So if you're coming from Target, for example, right, along Pioneer Trail, you go to a roundabout, you head north, you hit another roundabout, then you continue westward. So that portion is a county road. And it's not a county road north of the roundabout. So not the section that is adjacent to this property owner's house, their backyard, is a city road. When you continue to 82nd Street, north of that, it's a county road again. So the county currently doesn't have plans for it to be a county road, but that kind of sets the context of the through traffic. That's not just city traffic, but in some cases more, local regional traffic that may be using Bavaria Road, which is why the comp plan looking out, 20 years to 2040, considers that there's the potential that as, Victoria grows, as Chaska continues to grow, and that movement, depending on what traffic does, could potentially require additional changes to that road. It may be a whole lane, it may not be. It could be the need for turn lanes. It's hard to say. We haven't gone and taken those next steps to articulate those things. But the comp plan is looking at how do we make sure that we preserve the right-of-way necessary to accommodate the reasonable potential for change on that section of roadway.
So I have a question. So right now we are talking about variant. I mean, the current situation, it's 115
25.
feet, right? I mean, after the deck, if you consider it's 115 feet, that's what you said.
Right.
So at this point of time, whatever is there in that property, we are talking, still it is like a 10 feet variance already there in that property. Is that right understanding? I mean, see, it is required to have 125 feet. Right now it's 115. The house and the deck are located 115 feet from the line. So that means it's
I
already
think decks are
Just the
allowed.
decks are 115.
Oh.
Right.
Yep.
deck we can allow. So
Yep.
they still keep the deck. So that
Correct.
means that's still considered like a 2 feet variance or really 12 feet variance, because I mean they still wanted to keep the deck, right?
Right, the deck can stay. The deck is meeting the setback requirements on the back side. But as soon as you add a building
Okay.
to the back,
Then again, okay.
that's where the variance request is triggered.
Hey Liz, in your presentation, you mentioned on one of the findings that there was other size options that would meet or stay within the setback. What is staff, what's their opinion on that size or that location of an addition that would actually fit the setback?
Well, looking at the current survey, The house is currently at 127 feet from the center line. So that effectively goes to that kind of outermost jut out for the building. So they do have space kind of in that L-shaped format that they could still stay within the setback of the roadway.
And do you know the size of that?
Correct.
No, do you know the size of that?
Oh, the size of that?
I mean, I know it's 2 feet, but
Yeah,
10 by 16 is probably that little spot, and then
Yeah.
over here would be like 5 by 10 L, so an odd shape.
Basically brings it to 20 by 20.
10 by 16, okay.
Is there,
Liz,
go ahead.
if you can pull back the property image, right, the blue highlighted thing, like I just,
oh, the highlighter one, yeah.
so that one, okay. So, because some of the other homes I see like a little less setback, I mean, is it like consistent across in that road or like something, some of them are built or like already have some variances or anything in that road? Did you try to find that information?
I would say most of them along Rosemary Lane are probably built pretty close to that
Yeah, because I see
125 foot.
some road is actually
Yep.
turning, right? So if I go a little down, maybe some of
Yep.
the houses looks even a little closer to the house. Just I'm wondering whether they have the exact requirement or not. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think the fact of the matter is that there are no homes today along this stretch that have a variance applied
Right.
to them. So all of the homes are, they may be right up to that 125-foot setback, or maybe a little bit past, but none of them go over that 100. So they're all compliant
Okay.
with
Yeah,
the
that's
setback
what I-
today.
Because that was how the builders put it.
Yeah,
I mean,
they
Right.
do it perfectly.
Right.
They maximize the yard space.
but it limits any kind of home ownership to be able to make any kind of changes or / additions because the builder has put it right up to the threshold.
That's correct. And that's not a situation that's uncommon.
Right.
You know, we can point to other examples of arterial roads that exist in the city where homes are built up to the setback. Really kind of regardless of the type of road it is, you know, it may be 125-foot setback, maybe 100-foot setback. But it's not uncommon that the developers are looking to maximize the square footage of the house. And so, or, you know, whoever is choosing the home at the time that they're building it are trying to maximize what they can get on their lot as well, right? And so, you know, they're gonna build up to that setback to the extent that they can in a lot of situations.
Right.
I think that's extremely common.
Yeah, and I'm assuming they didn't just sort of randomly pick a setback. It's based on some sort of
Zone code.
engineering, zoning, primarily for the safety
For the
factor.
classification of this road, this is the setback that ordinance sets.
Right.
So it would be consistently applied for this sort of classification of road.
Thank you.
Yep.
Based off of this photo here, if we took this photo a year from now and they had did the project, we wouldn't see any difference though looking at this photo, would we? It would still be, because the footprint's staying the same basically with the deck.
Yeah, I mean, in regards to that question, I think there'll be a slight difference in terms of where the deck sits today. You would see that kind of being rounded out.
Well, the deck would go around to the garage. Which
Correct.
it doesn't currently do. That would be
Yep.
the only difference that you would see.
That you
Doesn't
would
come
see.
deeper into the yard that way. Okay.
Hey, Liz, what safety concerns are there for infringing into the 125 setback for this location?
I think it's, you know, more of a welfare piece of the separation and the volume that's associated with that road. So when you get a classification of that nature and its potential, having a larger separation from the road leads into better welfare for the person utilizing that property. And there are separation safety components too, in terms of ensuring that there's adequate separation from what people are using as a part of the home or the lot in regards to how far away that is from from the road as well.
Just point out too that there's a berm that starts there too, so my house is more of an elevation, so you don't actually see the deck from the street at all, because it kind of just goes up into a little kind of berm that starts kind of hilling up that way too, so you can't see that.
And to add to that point, is I know.
Well,
Do they
we'll
need-
allow
do
you
they-
guys
do they
to
need to-
come up and speak
Yeah, we'll-
in a
we do need to
minute
Yeah.
here.
When we finish, we'll have you guys come up.
Having been in road design for over 30 years, I agree with what the planning group is saying, because I've seen too many places where variants were allowed, and then you come through and try and design a road, and it costs a whole lot more money and a whole lot more special things to fit a road in, and then everybody complains.
Yeah. I myself am not too concerned about health or safety, more with the fact that the variance established with the city and state, it doesn't, there's not an undue hardship. There's not a wetland preventing, there's not a wooded slope. There's not something unique about this property with the neighbors that doesn't allow them to do what they want to do. Obviously, they need the height. You know, could add on to the house, you could do something else, but not for a sport court possibly. I mean, it's kind of one of those things when you build a house or buy a house, you kind of set in potentially for developers. So I do appreciate the years of experience on the roadside. Is there any other discussion? Before I open it up to public hearing?
Let's do public hearing and
Okay.
then come back.
We will open the public hearing at 7:32. And so if anyone would like to address the commission, then they can do so now.
This would be your
Oh.
opportunity. if you
Yeah,
want to-
go ahead.
Yep, the
Yeah,
formalities of the meeting. Yeah.
sorry,
And
can
when
we
you-
get to this?
Yeah, please state your name and address for the record.
Jimmy Son, 1142 Rosemary Lane, Chaska, Minnesota.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time out to hear this. Yeah, all the facts are there. You all kind of see that, and this is a long shot, but I knew I wanted to go through this process because it's been a wish list for our family to do. We love the community, we love the neighborhood. Winters are terrible here, obviously. So, you know, in hindsight, you're right. You go into these things and you don't really plan for this, right? I could have just gone to the harvest and done something down that way, but we really like the community. We wanted to try to do something for our family and the kids in the neighborhood. We have the resources to do this. So yeah, just kind of we designed it also in a way to be minimally intrusive to everybody around. And it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but thought it was a good design so that it just doesn't infringe on anybody's eyes or anything like that. It's a you know, the road in the back there is what it is. If it does get wide, that is the rules, and I respect that, and the setbacks are set the way they are. But yeah, if it wasn't for the variance, and if there was any other possibility to do something like this, our builder was amazing. They maximized the absolute most space, which doesn't leave you a lot of room for much. We do have a court in the front yard, so we do play a lot in the summer. It's just in the winters are kind of hard for the kids. And yeah, this winter's just been tough because they've been getting really sick. So yeah, that's kind of my spiel. Any questions from you all or anything for that matter?
I don't, anyone else on the commission?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to
And,
address?
I'm sorry, my contractor probably wants to
Yep.
say just a few words.
Yeah, I have a question.
Make sure to come up to the
Yeah,
mic so they can
I'm
hear you.
Scott Corbin, I own Corbin's LLC. I do a lot of building around the cities. And so when we first started this, I checked into, I knew that the setbacks were going to be an issue because I deal with them all the time, right? I have to deal with them. And what was that? What's the development that's right past the RT? Chevelle. So when I did some research, sorry, I didn't remember the name. The setbacks were created because of Chevelle, not knowing what that was going to be, right? Because it was really big, they didn't have it blocked out. They didn't have all that built out yet as they were building that. And when I checked into it, I talked to some people here at the city, and they told me that Bavaria will never grow again because kind of opposite what you said to me or said tonight. I'm not arguing. I totally respect setbacks. I deal with them all the time. I'm just going off the facts that and the research I've done. And for the next 15, 20 miles, there's one development, because I'm interested in it, that's going to be built. So in my eyes, what I'm seeing is that there's nowhere for anything to go, right? And I just would like to say that we worked really hard at putting this so, the neighbors and everything could see, and we really appreciate your time. I'm just letting you know our research that we've been doing ourselves. That.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else?
I'll just say a couple things.
Sure.
So my name is Mike Ware. My address is 1154 Rosemary Lane, so I am
Thank
the
you.
house up on the top of the cul-de-sac there. So not direct neighbor, but, I'm in favor of this, per your comment, Commissioner. The houses down closer to Rosemary Circle definitely are not at 125 feet setback. I didn't bring a tape measure this afternoon, but I would have kind of measured that. So I would challenge that those houses are actually set back to 125 feet. But, the plan that Jimmy and contractor have come up with is a great plan. It's not obstructive to any of the neighbors. I know there's other neighbors that couldn't make it here tonight that are supportive of this. Hopefully I get to play in there every once in a while if it does happen. But, I just want your consideration, to allow this variance, I don't think the road will probably get widened. So I think, it does make sense to allow the variance, and just kind of want to support my neighbor and this, and come here and speak to all you guys.
Thank you.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I think there is a berm on the side. There's a house right next to Jimmy's there, and when I first came to it, it's got a very steep slope, probably, 15 feet higher than his house. And all the water actually runs from all that neighbor's yard, those 3 yards down into his backyard. So as we were talking about this, he was like, and we're gonna have to do something with the backyard because I can't even be out there, and if I am, I'm in the way back. So he's even closer to the road. His kids are closer to the road if he's in his backyard, because it's mud. I mean, you couldn't go back there. It's a swampland back there because of the drainage. Every time it rains, every time it snows, it's a low spot. So that's what I noticed when I was there. So when we did our plans, we are going to have to put a sump pump in, right? Because all that water is going and figure out drainage to get it back out. So I do see more collecting water in his backyard, which might, I don't know if it hinders you guys playing or not. I just noticed that on my end. So.
Thank you again.
Rob, I got a question for Mr. Sun. Mr. Sun?
Yes.
With your neighbors, it sounds like you've talked to all of them. Were there any neighbors that were opposed to the project?
No, I'm very close to majority of the neighbors. It's a pretty tight-knit community there, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there anyone on Zoom?
Let me look. Nope, there's no one.
Okay. Looks like that's probably the rest of it. So at 7:39, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to commission to discuss and render our decision.
Hey, Liz, I do have a kind of a question. It's kind of a general question, only because Google Maps is a friend. How many houses along Bavaria Road back up to Bavaria Road? And specifically, we'll say Rosemary and Rosemary Circle.
We can do a general count here, I think, trying to look.
Because I'm looking at about 8, maybe 9 houses on Rosemary Lane. And then,
I'm counting 12.
well, up to, not including the one on the circle side, so. But then on Rosemary Circle, there's, I would say, slightly more.
Sure, yep.
Yeah, I guess maybe it
I'm
depends
just
on how we
questioning,
want
I
to
mean,
look at
because
it.
back to the point of the, you know, what makes it unique and I'll say, crossing that threshold that could make it different, because you do have these houses that are along Rosemary Lane that are right up to the boundaries because they could, but then you have Rosemary Circle, which has a larger gap because of probably some tree preservation or whatever the landscape is there that's to the south. So what makes it unique is that how the area was plotted makes it difficult for any kind of changes being made to the property. And knowing that they are not on the corner, so it's not as if it's direct eyesight of any kind of turning lanes or anything like that, and the ability to keep it hidden for the most part, trying to go down versus build up. Any person driving wouldn't know any different that there's something that's built underneath the deck. So I guess to me, it's hard for me to say that there's not an opportunity to grant a variance to this, because they're not trying to build out closer, they're trying to stay underneath the deck. Yes, it's a variance. They're seeking a variance to be able to build. But at the same time, they're keeping it in the confines of what you can see and where they're at. So to me, I think the property does cross that threshold of being unique in comparison to those that are on Rosemary Circle, which are south of them, that have a larger gap and are able to stay within the 125 setback from Bavaria Road. And it's all because of how it's platted initially. So I think there's an opportunity there to be able to at least discuss granting the variance.
I do see the same, like, maybe their property line might not have any, those conditions which might, help them to get the variance. But as they were saying, there's some edge of that property, just, that next to the property is having some slope or whatever, that might not be part of their property line, but still affecting, or maybe just as you mentioned, like, yeah, this property, whatever the plan they are suggesting, for me, I mean, it's not actually, I know the numbers are different between the build versus the actual building versus the deck or whatever, but I don't see, it's not actually changing the landscape or look or whatever of that particular property, even for whoever is going into, or maybe if the building is, I mean, if the road is expanding, it's not, I mean, whatever is there in the deck. So safety concerns wise or anything, based on whatever we see in the Google Maps and all, I don't see any safety concerns, because the property is much like having enough space. My personal opinion, I agree with the commissioner, like, yeah, there is an opportunity to discuss about like granting a variance in this case.
So my personal, just to discuss this, would be, I think it's bigger picture than that. I agree that there's probably not going to be an issue with the road. There's probably not going to be an issue with health and safety. I'm all for physical activity. I think it's great. People should be able to do what they want with their house, but the zoning is there, the ordinance is there, the variance is there. There is no practical undue hardship. In my opinion, the house is down the way. Maybe they cost more, maybe they didn't. The land was there when you bought it. The ability is potentially there. Does it mean that makes this property undue? It's not. There's no physical limitation on the property other than the boundaries that the developer set forth when they developed the property and set a price tag on it and said this is what you're buying and that you're building up to this standard. So, there's no hill or wetland or historical something or another. There's nothing that's can say, well, my neighbor right next door doesn't have this and I do. I've got this well in the middle of my property, a historical, like something I got to work around. There's just nothing there. And so, you know, it probably gets overused, but the precedent would be like, you know, we do this, and then the neighbor next door wants to do an art studio, and then the one over here wants to do a pool with a thing over the thing, and like, you know, it's like, well, our neighbor gave it, and so it just, there needs to be a legitimate reason. And unfortunately, I'm all for a sport court. I think it's a great opportunity for kids. I have kids, but I just don't think it meets what the city defines. And so for me, I think it's, unfortunately, doesn't work.
I'll give my 2 cents here.
I'd like to say yes, I just don't think it works.
Right. I was the guy kind of peeking in your backyard on Sunday, so I apologize. So I'm a big proponent of private property rights. You should be able to do with your property what you want to do to a certain extent, right? At the same time, we have to have rules and regulations within the city to look out for our interests, in this case, 20 years down the road, 50 years down the road, 100 years down the road. I agree this doesn't necessarily fall into a variance, but it also doesn't really make common sense either, in that we're not really changing the footprint of the property here. We're adding a sport court underneath an existing deck. So, you know, when you look at this, again, a year down the road, if they did the project, you wouldn't see really a difference there from a satellite photo or an overhead view of it. I asked the question before if they could put a sport court in the backyard, and they can. I think, you know, if the road does expand or there's an incident on the road there where a car crashes into the backyard, I would rather have my kids in the sport court than on an outdoor sport court there. I think that would be a safer measure that way. Again, the term variance doesn't necessarily fit here, I don't think. But I'd love to see another tool that we could use that would allow this project to go forward, just because I think it fits into the neighborhood. I think it's not going to separate. We're not looking at putting on a 25-foot addition off the back of the house that's going to be completely unique from the rest of the homes there. It's going to still blend into the rest of the homes there.
So let me ask you, so in this case it does.
Yep.
And then in 6 months, the next neighbor wants to do it, but they can't hide it?
Well, and I agree. So that's where it gets sticky, is if you do it for one, you have to do it for another, right?
Buddy. And then
But
it's not
each-
just this road.
Right, but isn't each projects have its own merit sometimes?
Every
they do.
variance request is independent of anything else. If we haven't learned that over the last 2 years, then we can't use the this, then this, and that. It's this property, this variance request, this discussion today,
Right.
these facts, these opinions.
Yeah, and some of the situations, like last 2 years are completely different and it changed in so many ways, right? I mean, how people are actually using their property, how people are actually the rules and whatever plans and all those things were not there before I mean, this situation was not at all there, and I agree. Each property, each thing is different than what we have. I mean, we have seen some cases like where we need to have 2 slots for 2 parking lots for every unit and all. We try to think about it now. Oh, no one is actually 160 units into 320. We might okay to give the variance for 290 for that particular property and all. At least last 1 year, whatever I have seen, variances are always discussed based on that particular situation. I definitely see that point here.
Is there another tool that's beyond a variance?
Well, so we wrestled with that. I think from a staff perspective, we're not coming out of the gate with any request desirous of saying and recommending no. But I think what we're looking at is a set of facts that exist as it pertains to the site, weighing them against the criteria of evaluating the request for a variance, and how state statute lays out practical difficulty, which is what Liz was walking you through. What you're describing, Commissioner Urbanski, is kind of a policy question, right? And should the setback be what it is? It kind of feels like that's the core of what you're getting at, which I think is a legitimate question. That's always a legitimate question, but the reality is the policy is what it is today. And so we're not, the discussion in front of you, the question in front of you, the decision in front of you isn't whether the setback should change. The setback is what it is. Does the facts of the site in relation to what's being proposed present a practical difficulty that warrants a variance? And staff's analysis, as Liz presented it, is that in this case, no, it does not meet that threshold. The idea of looking at should the setback change is a whole different question. That's a much broader question. And that would apply to the entirety of the road. That gets into analysis that's done in the comprehensive plan and what the future of that road should be, or maybe needs to be, and those sorts of questions, which is not what we're talking about this evening. So I don't have a quick answer for you, or an easy answer for you, but what we're bringing forward to you is the tool that's in the toolbox. Unfortunately, in this case, per staff's opinion, and based on what Liz is presenting, our argument is that it doesn't quite meet that threshold. We don't have anything against sport courts ourselves. We don't necessarily think that what's being proposed is a horrendous thing, but what we're obligated to do, in and of itself, right? What we're obligated to do is evaluate what's being proposed against the regulations that exist, and what it takes to achieve a variance. Unfortunately, in this case, we just don't see that argument there.
Yeah, I'm looking at the questions that you asked. Is the house still usable? It is, just not the sport court. I mean, could they do it somewhere else? Potentially. Will it cost more money? Possibly. But it's not, not supposed to be our concern. If there's other potential options. I just don't see the hardship. I just don't see what there is here that's different from the neighbors. And so I'm trying to follow this city standard.
It's not necessarily what's different from the neighbors. I have a question for the applicant. Is your basement finished?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm assuming it makes it difficult for you to have any kind of open space because the basement's finished, correct?
Oh, to use it to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For any kind of exercise or large space?
They certainly try.
I'm sure they did. Okay. So that would, to me, they're trying to provide for a space safe on their property to be able to exercise. And we'll just use that as just a simple term there. They currently don't have a space to be able to do that. The plan is to be able to minimize the effects from anybody while still providing for their family. And they're doing the right activity by coming through and having this discussion to be able to see what can actually be done. Because I think that's the part where it's all in the eye of the beholder. And I think from what we've experienced in the variances that have come through and will be coming through tonight, it's a matter of what does staff feel is the right answer. And it's that feeling side of things that puts this in a difficult spot, because the homeowner is wanting to do some things to make things better for their family, try to stay and not make it an eyesore, try to make it fit in. And looking at this specific request, yes, there's the requirements that it has to cross through, but from my seat, I think it gets there, to be able to at least approve a variance or recommend approval for a variance and continue this discussion.
Can I ask a question? When I was
You'd have to come up to the microphone so they can catch you.
When I was reading the city website, there was something about a 25-foot granting. I don't know if it's through you guys or an extra 25 feet can be granted to a property for, I guess, probable cause, or I don't know. Can you maybe help me with that? You don't-
I'm
it
not
was on the
familiar with
website. I thought
an ordinance
that
like
it-
that.
ordinance that- Okay, I might
Yeah.
be wrong.
Yeah.
But,
I can speak to that. There's a Carver County code section, and this is all based on decisions that aren't made yet.
Yeah.
It's 15234 for a reduced setback. But that comes with the confirmation that the road isn't getting widened. And I don't think we're there yet, but I'm just
Right.
saying that was something that I researched.
Yeah, and that's a Carver County requirement, so that's not
Oh, okay.
within Chaska's jurisdiction.
So confusing, that street is so confusing. It goes
and would
across.
there be anything we could do, like Jimmy and I, to, I guess, pursue that setback anyway, any further?
So
Like what?
I'm not familiar with the ordinance or the Carver County code that you're pointing to, because that would be Carver County's to manage. My assumption is, since it's Carver County code, is it would apply to a Carver County roadway. In this case, unfortunately, like I was saying before, this is a unique segment of Bavaria Road that is not a Carver County roadway, it's a city roadway. So that provision wouldn't apply in this situation.
I didn't realize that.
So like the city zoning would still apply even if this were a county road, because you're within the same jurisdiction. There are a lot of county roads from a lot of cities.
I think they end up giving you like 50 feet back, and they have a formula that they do across all the setbacks, and their setbacks are actually very similar to what Chaska's are when I read through it, so I didn't realize that.
Okay.
Do we know what would happen if, let's say this goes through and they can build their sport court and all of a sudden we need to do some revamping with Bavaria because it's heavily used? Do we know what would happen if all of a sudden we need to expand right there or put in a turn lane that leads up to somewhere? I mean,
I think it's hard to wrestle with hypotheticals. How this road would expand and, what exactly we'd be doing, it's hard to say. I think the way to maybe look at it is based on conditions that are projected, so this is looking at the 2030 comp or 2040 comp plan and how we're looking at setting classifications for roads at that time, which is, again, not a question at the table tonight, but to help give that background. What's done there is, analysis of the regional roadway system. This is one component of that, and how we envision traffic rates to increase or decrease or change, right, over the course of time, based on estimates that we have for land use changes that could occur. And that's set by our land use plan and other communities' land use plans. And so, understanding how that network functions and works through modeling, we begin to realize, which roads are going to have the potential for more pressure in the future. And so therefore, there's an importance to preserve that opportunity, that right of way, and those classifying them as such appropriately, so that it can handle that change over time. What exactly is going to happen in this specific spot, there's no way for me to really say that to any level of certainty. But it's more about preserving the ability to respond and accommodate those changes that we would foresee in the future based on the assumptions that we're making about growth.
Anybody else before we take a vote? No? I think we've kind of talked it through for almost an hour, so we probably let them on their way and move on and kind of see where we're at. Will anyone like to make a motion on the recommended denial of the variance to Bavaria Road? So when you're voting, when we make the motion, we're making a motion to deny. So if you vote yes, you're denying. If you vote no, you're not denying. It's kind of opposite of what we normally do. Just want to point it out.
I want to clarify, that's staff's recommendation.
Right. No, I know.
Commissioners can determine what motion they want to put on the floor.
Okay, so we can do it either way. Thank you.
Yeah, just, I would like to make some last comments. basically.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So, yeah, there are some rules, there are some situations where we can just look at it and just case by case, scenario by scenario, right? And in this scenario, yeah, I still see as look and feel perspective or any in space uses perspective, whatever the cases we see. And there are three conditions we were talking about. One, safety concerns. I don't agree with that safety concerns because of the new build, whatever it is there. I mean, irrespective of what recommendation, what was listed over there. So based on that, I would like to say, we should be giving the variance. So I would be voting like no for, denial.
Okay, I'm going to just start a motion, and then you guys can vote accordingly, so it's not confusing. I'm going to motion with recommendation of staff. So I'm going to motion that recommend denial of the variance of Bavaria Road setback at 1142 Rosemary Lane. Jimmy's Son, PC 2023-09. So I'm setting the motion for denial. So if you're voting in denial, then you're voting yes. Otherwise, you're not. So all those in favor?
Hold on, I need a second.
Hold
Oh,
tight.
sorry. Yep, I need a second.
Need a second for that.
Yep, sorry.
Yep.
I need a second for the motion for denial. Usually I don't start this.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 We should do this in, how many was
One at
it?
a time.
So,
Do a roll call.
yeah, let's do roll call.
Do I do the roll call or does Rob do the roll? Okay,
Or Rob can call for roll call right now.
okay.
He can say those two. Mr. Chair, if you feel that voice vote was too close to call, you can call for a roll call vote.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
And then I can,
Yep.
okay.
Couldn't hear it all.
Commissioner Purdy,
Nay.
Austin,
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Carver,
Yes.
Commissioner Boswell,
Nay.
Commissioner Brass,
Yes.
Commissioner Gory,
Aye.
Commissioner Olson,
Nay.
Commissioner Urbanski.
Nay.
So split?
Vote was split, 4 and 4.
So it is a split vote. Technically speaking, I think Commissioner Carver is serving as an alternate tonight.
Correct.
So although she can voice her vote, the vote does not count. So I don't know where we landed without Commissioner Carver's.
You were
I was a
Or
yes.
3 nay.
a yes to the recommendation of denial, so it'd be a
So-
3-4 vote, 3 ayes, 4 nays.
Yep, and I made the motion to deny. So we have 3 yeses to deny, 4 noes.
Correct.
Maybe I should have did it the other way around and make it easier, but I was just going with what staff got to make it clear.
No, because because ultimately that's what's being recommended from.
Right, and so we
planning
gotta-
To city council.
So either you vote against it or not. And
So
I
the
wanted
motion
to
did
do it
not
that way.
carry.
I'm sorry?
The motion did not carry.
Motion did not carry. Yep.
Did not carry, correct.
Right.
So I'd like to make a second motion that we approve the variance for this project then.
So the motion would be to recommend.
Recommend,
approval to the
right.
City council.
Yeah.
Yes.
I second.
So
Yeah, we do need findings of approval to go along with that motion. is there a certain amount?
Yeah, let me clarify. The staff presented their report with findings recommending denial, to support that denial. The issue is, has the board articulated findings to support approval? So as you make the motion, articulate the reasons why the practical difficulty standard has been met to support an approval.
You always make things more difficult.
See, this is kind of where I was
Like I talked about.
coming from, where I personally feel like it would be a yes vote, but I don't feel like the ground is there to make approval.
Well, here's a question back to this, and I'll just kind of play the devil's advocate. Staff has had this for a month and a half, maybe longer, to be able to do their findings. We have had it since Friday afternoon to read. For us to provide findings is going to be impossible. What we have done is said that we don't necessarily agree with staff's opinion, and to be able to say that we can find findings is going to be difficult for us in our capacity. So
I think.
So do we, I guess here's do we have to have something that is in an affirmative?
I guess I think that's an interesting question. I think you've got options here. If you want to make a motion to approve, I do think that it's important that the commission substantiate the rationale for its approval to the best of your ability. You don't have to make another motion. There was a motion put forward. That motion was voted down. That is the result that staff can carry to the planning commission, or I'm sorry, to the city council, is that the planning commission voted against staff's recommendation for denial.
Right, so we're fine the way it is.
So it's
Yeah.
by default, we are saying we are denying
Goes to
that.
city council, they
So
know
that,
that.
we are not-
so then that, the staff's presentation to council in that scenario would be, we would carry forward the recommendation that we did to you all tonight and reflect that the planning commission, heard staff's presentation and took a vote and did not carry forward, that recommendation.
So,
If you want to do an affirmative vote, that's your prerogative, but it would be important, I think, to substantiate your rationale for that affirmative
And
vote.
so I made the motion, and I'd like to keep it that way because then it's on the record that way. And council then gets kind of a little bit more in-depth information that way, I feel. Right? I guess, when I'm looking at this for findings, and again, I wish we had another tool beyond variance. We don't. But in this particular property, when I look at it, we're not changing the footprint of the property the way it sits right now with the deck on it. Now, the deck is an attached structure that doesn't have a full foundation under it, but it won't change the overall size of the structure the way it sits right now. So it just kind of makes sense without having a tool other than the variance. That's the only option we have, is to try it under a variance. That's a really lousy findings, but that's what I'm going with.
Right. And for mine, it really comes back down to the cluster of houses that are on Rosemary Lane are situated differently than the houses that are to the south on Rosemary Circle. And that makes it unique because those are the only houses along Bavaria Road that are remotely close to the 125 setback. So you have one side, we'll say one side of the subdivision is fine, the other side isn't. And it's just how it was platted, which makes it undue for those homeowners to be able to do anything to their properties. So that's where I stand as into the undue just side of things.
So one quick question, like if we are not able to carry this motion, right? So as the current state. So if it goes to the city council also just say not able to, vote against to whatever the staff recommendation. Will the applicant has the opportunity to just proceed with the project, or they need to come back for another, variance acceptance approval or something needed?
So council makes the final decision on the application in front of them.
So for the council, staff is going to recommend the same recommendation, if I understand right, to deny that.
Yeah.
But if the city council also agrees against to the staff recommendation, what is going to be happening? That's just wanted to understand.
Then they would be
They
approving.
can go to
it.
council.
They can
and
go
get
to the
approved.
variance. Yeah, okay.
We're a recommendation, they're the final vote.
Right.
They can go on the 17th and get approved if city council decides to go with our recommendation, which was 4-3.
Okay.
4-3? Yeah. If they decide to do that.
Right.
So, just to clear it up then, are we gonna leave it that motion didn't carry and it goes on, city council knows it, or do you wanna try?
I think Commissioner Urbanski has a motion on the table.
He does.
He does.
And there's been a couple points of rationale behind to support that have been articulated. I think Liz has recorded those. So I don't,
So you need a
I'm
second.
not quite sure whether a second was put forward.
I haven't heard.
Okay, so a second's been put forward.
No, I was not, but.
Either of them. So second, I can second. Yeah.
Okay, so then you'll need to proceed with a vote on it.
Now we're voting for it. Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I think it was the 4 again. All those not in favor,
Nay.
nay.
Nay. I don't think it counts, so it doesn't
Doesn't
matter.
count, unfortunately. Okay, so, or probably fortunately in this case.
Yeah.
Here. So, 4-3. And I think that's it. We can move on to the next item.
Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Good luck on Monday.
There's an opening if
Yeah.
you'd like.
Yeah.
On the park run. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on, like, we can talk more afterwards too, but I do think like the Rosemary houses on this side versus that side, I think is dangerous. To kind of say like, well, these ones are different because, like, let's say you bought a condo. You knew going in, you bought a condo and it has these property lines. I can't build into my neighbor's.
But there's like 8 or 12 houses that have shorter backyards. They're one of them. The rest of them all have deeper backyards.
I know,
So
but
it's,
I mean, I lost a
Maybe
carnival
like-
in my backyard of my house. I got woods and it's, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like it's a little bit tough.
I get
If
it.
you buy a townhome, you know you're buying a townhome, you know, because the houses across the street have a full yard. Doesn't make it unique, it's just probably a block.
Well, it does make it unique.
Not in terms of undue hardship, that's just the property you bought.
We
If you
need
could
another
afford,
tool. is what we need.
Right.
if you could afford
The
50
the beauty
acres.
the beauty part is,
You built
it's not a
50
Carver County road.
You built
So
50 acres.
you're not dealing with
Yeah.
Carver County regulations. It's,
We wouldn't be having this meeting if it was.
right, that would be, yeah, right.
Yep, no, we're moving on to the next one here. Liz, can you go on to 7B?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Thank you, members of the Planning Commission. We have a request this evening for a preliminary site and building plan, preliminary plat, zoning ordinance amendment, and a variance request for the S-Lot and Ernst Home, also being dubbed as Chaska Yards. This is a project being proposed by Carver County CDA. The site in question really includes the 3 lots that face towards Walnut Street, but primarily the 2 lots immediately north of the city-owned parking lot. Excuse me, the middle lot contains the historic S House on it. The northern lot is currently vacant. It used to house the Joseph S House, which was also a historic resource, but was demolished. Getting back to our 3-step process, we have seen this a couple times, so I just want to reiterate that we are just at the second step of our 3-step process with this project, which is the preliminary. So there's still another process or step after this one that you guys would be able to see. I'm not going to get too much into the historic background here since we've been over that a number of times. Just know that the existing structure on the property that exists out there today is a local historic resource and is also a contributing resource into the National Walnut Street Historic District. So again, this property dates back to 2014 when the Ernst home was relocated onto this site, and that was as a part of a redevelopment project for Fireman's Park. The Ernst home used to sit where Fireman's Park is as an effort to initiate that redevelopment plan on Fireman's Park. The city did relocate the historic home, Ernst home, to where it sits today in an effort to save the historic structure, but also support the redevelopment project in Fireman's Park. The S lot, which had the S house on it, burned down in late 2014, and then it was subsequently demolished in 2017 when we couldn't obtain any grants to rehabilitate or restore the structure. So since that time, the city has owned the property and has been marketing the S lot and the Ernst home together to be reused. So since that time, both properties have been sitting vacant, and the Ernst home is definitely at a state where it needs to be occupied and put into a state of repair. The first time that we saw the concept plan for this project dates back to January of 2022. The concept plan was approved for a 4-unit owner-occupied project by Carver County, CDA. Then February, excuse me, I've got an ailment. Back in February of 2023, so just a couple months ago, you guys saw the original preliminary plan come through for this 4-unit project. After Planning Commission approval, the applicant did decide to withdraw their application so that they could further work on their lot configuration. If you remember, at our Planning Commission review, we were starting to talk about how the lots were going to configure on site, and I think there were still a lot of questions on the applicant's end that they really wanted to figure out. So they did decide to withdraw and work on what the lot configuration would be for the site. They also desired to eliminate the need for an HOA on the property, as that was just an added management piece that they felt they didn't have the appropriate resources to be able to maintain. So the common areas that were associated with the property and the project are one of the reasons, or one of the pieces that did get eliminated from the February 2023 plans in the effort of the CDA wanting to eliminate the HOA, because if you eliminate the common areas, there's no need for an HOA. So that is kind of the background as to why it was withdrawn, and so that things could get worked out a little bit more on that end. So I do want to go over a couple of the changes that have occurred since February of 2023. The first one being the lots and the lot configuration on the project. So the preliminary plat now shows 5 total lots. So 1 lot for each housing unit and their associated garage stall and surface stall and private yards would be contained in each lot for each unit. And then 1 lot will be created for the city-owned parking lot south of the S and Ernst sites. And the reason that lot is being tied into this development is due to the fact of where the property line of the Ernst house sits today. It actually encroaches or falls over the city public parking lot. So a part of the pre-plat and zoning, that property line would get pulled back behind the retaining wall that exists out there. The other change, which I noted, is the common areas of the project did get eliminated. Before, they were showing a central courtyard, shared garden spaces and yard games, kind of more in the center of the site, and all of those pieces have been eliminated and transformed into added private yard space for each of the units. In some essence, some of that look and feel of some of that kind of common open space still somewhat exists, but some of the amenities that were currently or previously in those spaces have been taken out. So again, the elimination of those common areas, again, were due to the fact that the CDA did not want to have an HOA on the property. Another change is some of the fencing for the private yard spaces have been reoriented, and specifically on the north side of the property. Before, the north side showed the fence to be set back a portion off the property line, but they can go up to the property line with fencing per zoning. So they have increased some of the private yard space with the redelineation of the fencing. And again, this was in response to some comments that were received during that initial Planning Commission review of the preliminary. There still need to have a couple tweaks done to the fencing just to accommodate some of SHPO's comments and need to get access to utilities on the north side, but that will all come through in the final. Landscaping, also in response to some comments that were received initially, where they decided to add coniferous trees to the north property line between units 1 and 2 and the adjacent commercial use. There is also a need for unit 3 to bring that screening onto their north property line to help with some of the screening needs adjacent to the commercial uses there. But again, those trees were added in response to some screening necessities that came out of that first Planning Commission meeting. The detached garage changed just a little bit. They did add some square footage to the east side of the garage so that there could be additional indoor storage for each of the units beyond having a car within those garages. So that's definitely an added amenity for the units. And then the decks and side entrances for units 2 and 3 have shifted to the sides of the homes versus the rear portions of the homes, so that the access to the private yard space is more efficient for those units. And then Unit 1 also added a side entrance so that they have direct access to their yard space. And I believe that was also a comment, or in response to a comment provided at Planning Commission. In terms of the existing conditions out there, we have the aerial here, as well as a couple images of some of the existing conditions on the property. In total, each of the properties are 0.2 acres in size, so a total of 0.6 for the total site. The north lot is vacant, the middle lot contains the Ernst House, and the southern lot contains the city-owned parking lot. The lots where the housing units would go on, they have direct access onto the alleyway that is within the mid-block of the block they're locating in, so they would have direct vehicle access off of that alleyway. The zoning out here is currently PRD 74, and again, that was put in place when a previous plan came through ahead of Carver County CDA's plan that put the zoning in place at that time. And then lastly, these properties are located along the historic National Walnut Street district, which is important to understand. So what's included in tonight's request, a preliminary site and building plan and preliminary plat that would redevelop the S lot and rehabilitate the Ernst home at 217 and 211 Walnut Street. And then it would include platting of the site into 5 total lots, so 1 lot for each housing unit and then 1 lot for the public parking lot. A second request to The project would be a zoning ordinance amendment to the PRD 74 zoning district. And really what that amendment would include would be updating the project name, the legal descriptions, and the approving graphic exhibits that reflect the current project that's proposed. That would also include updated setbacks for the north, south, and interior property lines, and include a development standard on building separation within that. Also included as a part of this request is a variance request from section 15.16.020F1, which is in regards to the general PRD building setbacks and separation requirement. The project specifically includes 4 owner-occupied units. 1 unit would locate in the Ernst home. 3 units would locate in new individual housing units. All of these units would have their own private yards. Each unit would have access to a detached garage stall and a surface parking stall adjacent to that. And then these units will be affordable and targeted towards households at 80% AMI, which is area median income. Getting to the PRD standards, so adherence with 15.16.020F, and we're familiar with most of these standards, as these did come through in some of the recent apartment project buildings, but these reference the building setbacks, lot coverage, floor to area ratio, and those would also come through on this project as well for building setbacks, lot coverage, and floor to area ratio. This one doesn't have the common open space attached with it because it's a detached single-family product, and that's only applicable to attached multifamily uses. So as it relates to the ones that are applicable to this site, building setbacks, and which also refers to building separation, there's a requirement for building setbacks from all property lines which form the perimeter of the total property in the PRD, or from all exterior dedicated street right-of-way lines shall be at least 30 feet or the height of the building, whichever is greater, and then a minimum spacing between principal buildings shall be 25 feet. The proposed building heights are lower than 30 feet, so the 30 feet would apply for the setback for the perimeter of the PRD. The nearest setback to the property line that forms the perimeter is 7 feet 8 inches, and that's located on the north side of the property. And then the minimum spacing between proposed buildings is 8 feet. So this portion of the code is what a variance request is being requested from or required. Lot coverage is being met, which is 20%, or shall not exceed 20%. They're at 17.7 for the overall PRD site. And then floor to area ratio is a 0.5 maximum, and they're at 0.32 for the overall site. A couple pictures of the existing Ernst house, and as you can see, it's in pretty rough condition. Definitely needs that TLC that would come with fixing up the building, but also having an owner in perpetuity. The site plan is shown on this slide here, and really we're not seeing much of a layout difference compared to what we saw in February of 2023. Again, the changes really center around kind of the central areas and how those were programmed and the common amenities being eliminated there, but really the units have stayed in their same locations through both those processes.
And Liz, the sidewalks would just be an easement, basically?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, so they'll have to record a shared access and maintenance agreement over the property so that all units have access to basically the common used sidewalk that would
Ingress and egress?
Correct.
Yep.
Out to the alleyway and out to Walnut Street, and then also what would connect into the detached garage. So that'll be one thing they'll have to put together, and they do plan to do that. The garage stalls are accessed off of the alleyway as well as the surface stalls right in front of those. Parking does meet the requirement for the amount of units out here, so each unit would have 2 stalls associated with the use. Here's a colorized version, much prettier to look at and kind of emphasize some of the green areas versus the walkways and where the building units are situated, as well as incorporating the landscaping there and the added landscaping on the north side. I know we've emphasized this before, just being directly adjacent to the alleyway, which will also be redesigned and improved to be what we call the Paseo, which will be basically a pedestrian thoroughfare for people to use kind of as an alternative away from Highway 41. And along with that, you know, there's design standards that are also getting adopted for the backs of these buildings, so that kind of this overall area, midpoint, mid-block area is activated and feels like an appealing area to travel through if you're a pedestrian. This will also have vehicular access as well for a portion of it. The north area, basically where Von Hansen's is, and north to 3rd Street would be pedestrian only, and then the same would be on the south side where the commercial buildings sit as well. So it'll be multimodal and have enhancements done to both the pavement as well as some of the elements around the Paseo to really activate that space and have it be an appealing thoroughfare for pedestrians to use. So there's always been an emphasis of ensuring that the edge of this property will blend in nicely with the improvements that are done with the Paseo, and so far that has been true. Also wanted to show kind of the lot layout, and we've colorized it just to make it more understandable for how things are associated, because there are a couple lots that are non-contiguous or they're not physically connected to each other, but essentially they'll be able to be of the same lot and ownership when it comes down to it. So Lot 1, Block 1 would be Unit 1, Lot 2, Block 2, Unit 2, and so forth into Unit 4. And each lot, again, would have their own dedicated interior garage space, as well as a surface stall associated with their lot. And then Lot 5, Block 1 would be the city-owned parking lot to the south there. These are just some turning exhibits to show that the movements for vehicles can be accommodated on this site, as well as emergency vehicles, even with the enhancements to the Paseo and the reorientation of vehicular traffic through the Paseo can still be accommodated through this site and adjacent. This is the landscape plan.
The fire truck?
That's a fire truck
Okay.
on the right side there. So using our larger fire truck.
Very
Their best
skilled
driver.
fire
Their
truck
best
driver.
driver, not
Yeah, only their best.
Yeah, and our fire truck drivers are very skilled, so they're going to be able to do this just fine. Landscape plan, more of the simplified version, just showing that addition of screening on the north side. Again, I think staff's only comment to the landscape plan is potentially adding in more screening on this northern edge as well for this unit to be able to screen what they're seeing on the backside of Von Hansen's. These are the drawings of the Ernst home. The majority of the building is going to be maintained to what it used to be or originally was. You know, a couple enhancements that'll happen are a front orientation of ingress to the house, and then there's a back addition added on the building as well that's been approved by HPC. Some floor plans if we need to refer back. And then these are the elevations for the proposed units and the color selection taken for the lap siding. I think our only comment is exploring a lighter, more neutral color, but also providing contrast with the Ernst home.
Is that a vinyl?
Sorry,
is that a
what?
Vinyl siding, or is that a?
LP Smart Side siding.
Okay.
Yep, hardy board. Yep. And they do propose to do some decorative fencing to delineate the private yards, which will be 4 foot tall and at least 50% opacity so that it meets our zoning code. And then a couple rendering visuals for you of different views of the site. So looking from the rear portion, more of a bird's eye view, and then the front side from Walnut Street. Some interior shot, or an interior shot on the upper image there, and then also more of a pedestrian view from Walnut Street. Couple bird's eye views and interior shots of more of the internal walkway area. And then on the back side, off of the Paseo or alleyway, looking north and south. So getting into the variance request, again, they're asking for a variance from section 15.16.020F1, building setbacks from all property lines being 30 feet and a building separation of 25 feet. They are requesting a variance to reduce that building setback from 30 feet to 7 feet 8 inches and reduce the building separation from 25 feet to 8 feet. Getting into their statement for practical difficulty and hardship, the PRD development standards create an unreasonable building envelope for one unit. It negates all other units in the detached garage to locate there. This also results in less density as a result of meeting those standards, which would be less than what was historically there and what the comprehensive plan guides this parcel to be for density, which is 12 to 40 units per acre. The setbacks and the building separation would also create a layout that would adversely impact the National Walnut Street Historic District and also alter the essential character of the locality in which it's locating in this case downtown Chaska and off of Walnut Street. A variance approval would allow the site to follow a layout and density that would be harmonious with the comprehensive plan's guidance, the National Walnut Street Historic District, and essential character of the locality. So they did put together an exhibit that showed how the 30-foot setback would apply on the site, which is shown in blue, and then what a 25-foot separation would look like from the Ernst home, and then if a unit did locate on the property in an area that would be allowed, what that would look like. So really what this is trying to show is that there are unreasonable gaps or buildable areas that just make it unreasonable to develop and meet standards out here. Getting into the variance facts, and I won't get into this again since we did in the first request, but it really comes down to meeting the practical difficulty of state statute standard, which gets to unique physical characteristics to the property that is due to circumstances that are unique to the property and not created by the landlord or landowner. And the variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. Oops. And then the questions we ask ourselves for the variance request and getting into the findings, and these are based off of staff's analysis of the variance request too. And these are quite lengthy, so I'll try to brief them up just for this presentation. So the request is reasonable to deviate from the building setbacks and the building separation. the property is already vacant on the north side, and the historic home on the south side kind of sets the tone or the physical constraint on the property. So it's already set the precedence for the setback along the streetscape there of Walnut Street. Plus, it establishes a significant building separation on the north property. If the standards for setbacks and building separation were to be strictly adhered to, the National Walnut Street Historic District would be severely hampered with the vacant area not being filled in, and ultimately the Ernst home would not be occupied as a result of this project not going through. Characteristics unique to the property present practical difficulties in complying with the zoning ordinance. So again, the historic Ernst home sets the stage for that because it's currently located out there. It is set in its permanent location. And this was a part of a larger community objective that goes back to our comprehensive plan, but also our downtown master plan, in facilitating that redevelopment site for Fireman's Park. The National Walnut Street Historic District also emphasizes the importance of a consistent streetscape. We've heard it before from SHPO that creating a consistent streetscape along the National District is important in trying to keep the integrity of the historic district in place. And adhering to the building setbacks and the building separation would certainly conflict with these emphases. The use of the property is reasonable and it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, the downtown master plan, and zoning ordinance. The comp plan guides this area to be downtown mixed use, which results in a 12 to 40 unit per net acre for residential uses. For density, this project would come out at 6.6 units per net acre with what's proposed, and would also create a configuration that would be harmonious with the surrounding context of downtown and the National Historic District. I think we can all safely say that a 30-foot setback and a 25-foot building separation is not a typical standard applied in downtown, and therefore applying it here would certainly alter the character of this area. And yep, getting into the essential character of the locality, it would be negatively altered if a variance is not granted. So those are the findings associated with the variance request. And we'll get to kind of the conclusion at the end of this presentation as well. Just want to note that the HPC and SHPO have both reviewed this application. HPC did approve a site alteration permit for the project. They're very favorable of the project as it is proposed. They also echoed the comment of exploring a lighter lap siding color on the new units. And then SHPO also provided a recent letter in March of this year. They had just some overall general comments to keep in mind, but some of the notable ones were the location of the fencing on Unit 1, and they were favorable of the flat roof concept on the detached garage being the least visually invasive option. A couple things to work on for final is further further exploring the lap siding color for the new units, such as a lighter color, the fence orientation, making sure that they meet SHPO's comments as well as utility crews' needs to access some of the existing utilities, and then also to continue to coordinate with SHPO as they move along in the process. In conclusion, you're going to be making 3 motions with this request this evening. One motion is to recommend approval of the preliminary site and building plan and preliminary plat for the S lot in the Ernst home, known as Chaska Yards, based on the conditions that are listed in the staff report. A motion to recommend approval of the zoning ordinance amendment to PRD 74, based on the draft ordinance that was included in your packet. And then a motion to recommend approval of the variance to section 1516020F1 regarding PRD building setbacks and building separation to reduce the building setback from 30 feet to 7 feet 8 inches and the building separation from 25 feet to 8 feet based on the staff report and findings listed within that. This is a public hearing. If it moves on this evening, it'll go to City Council on April 17th. Happy to answer any questions if you got them. We do have the applicants in the audience as well.
Thank you, Liz. First, before I open the public hearing, like always, discussion amongst commissioners, staff, if anyone has any questions.
No questions.
No, good, I mean, it's good that the improvements were taken from February and put into place.
That is nice to see.
It's a nice looking plan for a unique piece of property.
Yeah, it looks really nice.
It really does.
I do have some questions for the applicant, so
Okay,
wait for it to
if we're
open
good,
up.
yep, if we're good with staff questions, I'll open up the public hearing. So we will open up the public hearing at 8:45. And anyone, I guess we have some questions, so if the applicant can address the commission, it'd be great.
We'll see it. Todd Grover, McDonald Architects, working as a consultant for the Carver County CDA.
Okay. The big change that came was the elimination of the HOA, so this may be more for you. But without the HOA and having these houses really close together is probably the part that I have the biggest concern with, which was before, yes, we knew we were going to have to give the variance because it's unique and we're being creative in that property. But you take the HOA out, now you have this cluster of homes that are now really close together with no oversight. So what is going to be put in place for conflict resolutions? We'll just go with the garage, the driveway, now that they're not community, now it's not shared space, so now I think it's unit 2, the one in the middle. What's going to be put in place to keep issues from arising, from just normal neighborly stuff, but because now you're putting them into a one parcel, how is that going to happen?
Chuck Swanson, Carver County CDA. The truth is that we were really trying to get away from the association. We just, financially, it doesn't work with the statutes that are out there, but as far as putting something in place for conflict resolution, we have not thought of to do something like that, more so because it's no different than any other neighbor. The lots are individually owned. There's nothing in any other area, I guess. I realize they are close, and you may have issues with your neighbor, but we feel it wasn't any different than any other neighborhood.
Well, but most situations like that are either townhomes or apartment buildings, which,
Row houses on the East Coast, and you rely on the cops if there's something that bad. I mean, it's just not a whole lot different.
so like I said, that to me, like I said, I knew the variance was coming just with what was doing, but being creative in the location was great. That's the one part that throws the wrinkle into it, because now you have that.
We looked at it as a property rights thing as well, so. Sorry.
If I may, at the risk of speaking on behalf of the applicant, we have talked about having an easement agreement, shared use agreement across that shared sidewalk. There's also, that would apply to the garage itself, and then the sidewalk that accesses the rear side of the garage. And having that in place to spell out how maintenance of those facilities will occur over time. So as the roof needs to get changed or maintained on the garage, there's some level of language within that with that easement agreement or that shared use agreement of that facility that spells out responsibilities for that. It's different than an HOA. It's not to the level of an HOA, but there is a mechanism in place to speak to how those shared facilities need to be maintained over time.
Is there then going to be some sort of, this is a little tricky, declaration or something in regards to like a couple of things like, someone wants to, yeah, it's like an HOA thing, paint their house bright pink. Or like a shed in the yard.
Or a chicken coop in the backyard.
Right, like it's like a shed in the yard.
Things aren't allowed in Chaska.
So how about the shed? Like, is that an ordinance thing? Because like I know in my neighborhood, we can't have them as an HOA thing.
I think it's,
Is it or is there nothing, or they can just do,
whatever they want.
I think that would go back to the city and the zoning, whether a shed
don't
would
shed,
be.
no sheds are covered in zoning, are they?
They are. They can be dually covered, where, you know, the city has our own universal standards
Got
for
it. Okay.
sheds. But on top of that, if a neighborhood wanted to, they can establish their own covenants to either limit or completely eliminate the use of sheds in general.
I was just, like, I hate to do hypotheticals, because you could do a million different things, but just what came to mind, something that someone does, if, like, expanding on Commissioner Olson here, like, if someone, you know, how do you kind of rein that in a little bit if you need to, or
It's
there's
the
some
same
sort
with
of.
like fencing, that sort of thing, city ordinances.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
What a
So we do have our own ordinances in place that
Yeah.
they would have to follow.
Yeah, it's just close. It'd be no different than you have a condo or an apartment, your neighbors on the other side of the wall, I mean, it's super close. This is better than that. But you do have, it is close.
The comprehensive covenants and restrictions work really well for something this size, where you have to get approval for if you paint or put new siding on, you know, rules on sheds, rules on fences that everybody agrees to when they buy the property that way.
I think those would be considerations for the applicant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
To determine how they want to approach that.
Things where we have not considered entirely.
Okay.
So I'm
And
just being honest.
And I think that's the part where it's like, you know,
And with, you
We're
know,
not
the
a farm.
restrictive covenants, how do you cover every scenario
Yeah,
that,
yeah, no, you can't.
so.
So instead, it's just gonna be your property rights. So
Yep.
is it,
I think a point of context
it's
on
separate
that.
it is separate parcels.
yeah.
So
They're
they'll have
separate
separate tax, that means they'll have separate property rights, yeah.
right.
And just contextually, you know, consider this site is located within downtown, which is, you know, HOAs don't exist in downtown.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of covenants that are there in downtown, so, you know, different than some of the more recently developed areas where you do see those covenants and HOAs and additional requirements and things like that. That's really not something that is very common in the downtown area.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about here, you know, these homes will exist within the environment in a similar way as the surrounding context. Not to say that conflicts don't arise in downtown between neighbors, they do, right? But our ordinances do apply, and I think there's a little bit of a proof of concept that it has existed for the last 150 years downtown.
I think the owners will appreciate non-HOA actually, probably.
Yes.
But to the contrary on that one is, what makes it unique is you have 3 houses on one parcel. So to say that it's just like everything else in downtown, it's not, because we're putting 3 in 1 versus 1 on 1, which makes it different. So it's to our responsibility to ask these questions and to forward think, because we are doing something different than the norm. Not saying it's bad, it's just, let's plan and think through these things, because we don't want issues to arise. I know early on we talked about the sidewalk that was going to go from Walnut to the alleyway. It doesn't seem like there's any restriction, and I know that we talked early to say, it's like, is there a way to be able to make it so it's not a thoroughfare from Walnut straight through for the general public?
Because it is private property, we could put up a decorative gate of some sort if we wanted to.
And that was the part where it's like, I know early on we talked about, you know, being able to at least semi-restrict it, and now that we're talking about how it's set up here, which is now truly it is private property.
Yep.
So what would be the recommendations to be able to, you know, make sure that people know that is private
So,
property, it's just not
just
a
a question.
sidewalk?
Would the sidewalk be private property, or it would be?
Yep.
Okay, It's,
Yeah,
that is unique.
Right.
To, like, because generally you think of sidewalks as public domain.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, and I think we would have a limitation on the east side just because of the historic district and what we can put there. But I think, you know, the intention is to have elevation change, you know, so that would feel a little bit more limiting. On the back side, I think we have a little bit more ability to have something that feels a little bit more restrictive. I don't think we want to necessarily put a gate there, but you know, something that feels like you're kind of walking on somebody's private, you know, this is not a place for the general public to go. Honestly, I don't know who would be walking there, just from a standpoint of the neighbors on the other side there's one or two neighbors directly across that they might want to use that to walk through there, but maybe probably everybody else would walk through the parking lot or walk on the sidewalks. So there's really not a lot of people, I think, that would be walking through the site, especially since you know, the public parking on the south. If anybody parks on the street out on the other side, more than likely, if they're going to the businesses on the other side, they'll probably be using the parking lot to access that, or other areas on the Paseo. I think the benefit of the Paseo is it's going to feel like a very public place to walk, and people are going to gravitate towards that rather than parking here and trying to make its way across what's going to feel a little bit more private, especially with a little bit more of the density on the site. With, you know, it's not, I just feel like it's not going to be some place that people will say, oh, this is an easy place for me to go and I'm welcome here. So,
But if you had to choose between walking through the parking lot or walking through the sidewalk, which are you going to choose?
well, I don't think.
I get the fact if you parked in the parking lot, you're going to walk through the parking
Yeah.
lot, but.
I just don't, I just, like I said, I just don't, if you look on the block on the other side, I just don't see that there's going to be a lot of people parking there and walking through there to access it. And that's the reason why the Paseo is being made, is to get people to park on the other streets and go travel north-south rather than traveling the east-west.
If it becomes a problem in the future, could all landowners on this parcel who kind of share this private sidewalk decide to put a gate in? Or a majority of them? Like, how would that work?
Or
From the
the
city's
owner of
perspective,
Yeah,
if-
city's perspective.
if the residents wanted to put a gate there, we don't have an ordinance in place that would say that they can't.
Okay, so if it becomes an issue, they could try to rectify the problem.
Right.
Correct.
And because it resides on Unit 1's property, technically Unit 1 could put a gate up.
Correct.
And the other three could object to it, but they would say, it's my property, I can. do
Well,
with
I
it.
think that.
Right, I mean, I'm just being devil's advocate and trying to go
Sidewalk
through.
and easement, though.
It would be under that easement, so I think it would have to be, all of them that would have to agree to that.
Right.
So,
Like I said, just trying to be devil's
No.
advocate when it comes to
it's
the odd things.
No.
So.
good to think about.
Yeah, I could, late
Right.
nights. someone,
But then that
try to
turns
take a short
into a liability side of things so if somebody is walking through, trips, falls, breaks their leg, it's on private property. The easement's now gonna spread across all four homeowners, right? Because that's what was agreed upon, right? But whose insurance would really be picking that up? So, like I said, you don't have to answer that today, but these are the things to think about, because the HOA and the common space would have had that answered. We've taken that away, now we've got to be able to make sure that these.
We really looked at it as, yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I understand where you're going from, and, the administrative, 15, 20 years down the road, I get it. But now it's because of that, we need to make sure that we've addressed the things that the HOA would have covered and taken care of. That now is the responsibility of those four common.
Duly noted.
Well, the liability issue is interesting.
Extremely, especially what Trump, it's like, yeah.
Whose property is it on? Someone breaks their leg. That's a weird one. Okay.
Not say, like I said, it's not gonna change anybody's
If we
decision
can
tonight, it's just.
Do all the, hypothetical 1,000,000 to 1, does it happen? But that is an interesting point. is not a public sidewalk. Now, even if it was if it was a public sidewalk, it's the responsibility of the homeowner to clear that sidewalk, right? Like in general neighborhoods, if I remember, so if someone slips and falls in front of your house, even though it's an easement public, that's your responsibility. It's kind of comes back to the homeowner on that, if it happens in your lot lines. So would that kind of be like, where exactly did it look? I mean, I don't want this all deep dive, but like, maybe is that an easy fix for how you, liability if something were to happen in this private easemented?
I'm not a liability attorney. I'm not going to pretend to be one.
I feel like we have an attorney here somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, if I'll jump in, I'll just reiterate, those are items that will be determined by the reciprocal easement agreement and handled among the property owners by a contract.
Okay.
In lieu of an HOA. Without the.
Maybe in that
process,
agreement,
it's impossible for me to understand.
something will be kind of drafted up in that reciprocal easement agreement to maybe address liability potentially.
Yeah, I mean, among the other concerns that any other collective.
We are working with an attorney to,
Yeah.
yep, so.
Because I'm sure there's.
This is not me creating.
Everyone's worried about
The
that.
attorney is creating
Yep, okay.
all of everything we're talking
And I can
about.
say that is a condition of approval, is having
Right.
these easements in place.
There are lots of twin home developments out there across the metro that have similar, that don't have HOAs, that have shared sidewalks.
Yeah,
And they figured it out. so
I'm sure,
there's a
yeah,
tool
I'm sure
for
they,
it.
yeah,
Yep.
okay. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant further? I think the public hearing is still open, so I have to close that if we're done. Good, any other things I'd like to address? Okay, so at 9:01, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission.
Do you remember what time you opened it?
Well, you can refer to the tape, please.
Okay.
Uh,
No, I just want to make sure there was actually a motion to open. I'm sorry.
8:45.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, any other further discussion? We have 3 things to take to a vote here.
I think this one's made good progress. It's just fun. It's unique, creative,
Yeah,
and
Needed.
needed and a good use of the
Right.
property. It's,
Takes a piece of property that hasn't had anything on it in a long time.
Yeah,
and makes it nicer.
It's an eyesore right now.
yeah, it's a nice.
It really is.
Little affordability aspect to it too, so it's nice, and I think it's, it kind of fills in that downtown look too. The variance, I think in this instance, meets the definitions. It actually goes with what is down there, so I am for that, so.
Hey, actually, Liz, and this is just an off question, but what was previously there were just 2 single-family homes, correct?
Yes, without buildings.
Right.
Yep.
So it's interesting that we have a parcel that had single-family homes that was put in a PRD that was different than what was there, and we're trying, it's back to the whole variance side of things and what we're using to justify, what should be there. I don't think they necessarily, you got apples and oranges when you got that, but at the end of the day, this is the part where what we're doing makes sense. It's, yes, it may be pushing the boundaries as into how close they are and how close they are to the line, but we're being creative to be able to actually solve the problem and make the development happen. So that's the part where, it's not pushing the limit on why it's justified. It's the matter of what we're doing is within the bounds. So.
Okay. Well, with that, I normally don't start it off, but I will. I'll make a motion to recommend to City Council approval of the preliminary site and building plan, preliminary plat for 4 housing units on the S lot in Ernst Home, Chaska Yard, subject to the following 19 provisions.
Second.
A second, Commissioner Corey. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We We have the second motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval for the zoning ordinance amendment to PRD 74.
Second.
Second, so Olson and Urbanski. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have the final motion to recommend approval for the variance. Anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the variance to section 15-16-020-F-1. PRD's building setbacks and building separation, reduce the building setback from 30 feet to 7 feet 8 inches, and the building separation from 25 feet to 8 feet based on the staff report and the 1 to 4 findings.
And is there a second?
Second.
Bija. Second by Aswa. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Facing the same.
That would bring us up to our patient applicants. I'm imagining here for 7C. Who does not have a variance right now.
No
Concept
variance.
plans, love 'em.
So,
All right, thank you, members of the Planning Commission. We have a concept plan for 3740 Chestnut Street being proposed by the property owner, Audrius Asakenas. The property is located on kind of the northern portion of the city of Chaska. It's located in kind of the industrial area of the city off of Highway 41. The property is highlighted in blue. Its adjacencies are Big Woods Lake, the Pond View development to the south, vacant land to the north, additional industrial and Highway 41 to the east. This property used to house the former Treehouse organization. They were a nonprofit organization dating back to the early 90s. They recently have vacated the site and sold the property to the now property owner, Audrius. They did conduct a neighborhood meeting, which is now a requirement before a concept plan is applied for. So they did do that on Tuesday, February 7th. They provided mailings out to everyone within 500 feet. Unfortunately, no one showed up. Well, or fortunately, no one showed up to this meeting. But they did still go out and actively start conversations with some of the nearby tenants and neighbors within Pond View, just to make sure that they got the notice and they were aware of the project being proposed. So they did reach out to River Valley Dance as well as Edward Sales, and they did get response back from either of those property owners or tenants. And they did provide some correspondence back, which we attached in your packet. Both of them are generally supportive. Just noted some things that'll need to be worked through, such as access, utility connections, snow removal, et cetera. The existing site is a little over 2 acres in size. Currently, there's a single-family home on it, as well as a detached garage, kind of out towards the highway. The area is wooded, and it appears that there's wooded steep slope on the western edge as it backs up to Big Woods Lake. There is an existing shared access off of Highway 41, and this access is shared with all the Pond View tenants or users to the south there, and that's how Treehouse also accessed their property. So that access plans to remain, and the access into the site will also be maintained. These are a couple images of some views into and out of the site. Some of the top images are more internal of the site, looking from the existing structure there out to the lake. and towards the Pond View development, and then some exterior shots, taken from the highway looking north into the site, and also to the east and the west, looking at the berm that's currently in place in front of that site. So they're requesting a concept plan approval for the construction of an office industrial building totaling 16,000 square feet in size. Right now, they have it planned for 8 individual tenant spaces within that building, roughly at 1,900 square feet each. The tenants that they're catering to are small emerging businesses that are transitioning out of smaller spaces, such as their homes. These users will specialize mostly in smaller production type operations, manufacturing, product distribution, or professional services like photography studios. These businesses needing outdoor storage or doing vehicle repair would not be allowed in this location. So if you remember the Chaska Tech Center project that was proposed on Fire Lane and Chaska Boulevard recently near downtown Chaska, they had a very similar business model associated with their building, and this is essentially kind of the same type of user and type of building that they're setting up for these smaller, lighter industrial type business users. This is the concept plan being shown on this exhibit. There will be one access into the site, which would come from that shared access off of Highway 41. One thing of note is the property owner, as well as the property owners of Pond View and tenants of Pond View, are actively working with MnDOT on this access point today and looking at solutions to make it a safer access into the site. We are also, so that conversation is still ongoing. We're also waiting for the memo from MnDOT specifically to this project to see if they have any additional comments. But that certainly is being looked at kind of as an ongoing piece that engineering is taking care of. Also, in terms of access, there's this vacant open area to the north of this site that's owned by TEL, the industrial company to the north there. They have an existing building off of Lyman, but they do own a big piece of property here that does appear to have buildable land on it. So one of the things that we've kind of mentioned to this property owner is ensuring that there's a preservation of an access to the north there so that this property has access out to the highway. The building is rectangular in format, and the pedestrian doors and overhead doors are situated on the north and south sides. Parking is almost fully in circulating the building there, and which shows stalls on the west, east, and south sides of the site with a total of 44 stalls. Excuse me. In terms of our ordinance, they're too short for this size of building. One of the things we have noted kind of as a part of our analysis is the kind of design of the parking lot and the drive aisles around the building, and looking at trying to avoid dead-end parking lots, because that really does become troublesome, mainly for emergency vehicles to access the site. You don't want them to get stuck out here, so they'll have to evaluate that as they gear up for preliminary, but also ensuring that the users of this property have adequate turn area if the parking lot is not able to fully connect due to setback limitations. So just a food for thought and kind of strong advisement for the applicant to look at as they proceed in the process is how this parking lot is oriented and functions. They did do their own turn analysis on this concept plan with vehicles or vans, trucks that are 30 feet in length, which would be the larger type of truck and type of user that would occupy the space, showing how they can turn in and out of the site. I think, again, it'll still be important to show efficient circulation through the site if that can be achieved, and turnarounds can be achieved efficiently, not only for the users, but also emergency vehicles. The building proposed, again, is rectangular in format. They are proposing a mix of masonry or a stone base with eaves and a type of wood siding, plus some glass overhead metal doors as well, and a pitched roof with shingles. So they'll have to meet the industrial design standards for this building. Staff's comments are, looking at the context of where they're locating to try to tie it into kind of the palette that exists out there, but also looking at the orientation and application of the materials on the building and trying to blend those harmoniously together. I think right now it looks more piecemealed and adhered to the building, so are there ways to bring all those materials together in a more cohesive fashion versus just strips of different material on each level, while also maybe looking at a palette that would kind of fit with the context of Chaska or kind of the surrounding context as a whole. So things to work on as they gear up for preliminary. They will need to delineate the wooded steep slopes on the site, which staff will help them with a field walk to determine where those setback limitations really fall. Work on the vehicle circulation, not only for the users, but emergency vehicles as well. Looking at the building design and material application and how the materials can tie in more harmoniously and with the Chaska context. And then also figure out more information on the shared access agreement for the Highway 41 access that exists today, or whether or not a new one is needed there. So in conclusion, we are recommending or asking you to make a motion to recommend approval of the concept plan for 3740 Chestnut Street, and then based on the conditions that are listed in the staff report. Happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we do have the applicant and property owner here to assist with questions too.
Thank you, Liz. So this technically is not a public hearing. However, if there's something you would like to say, we could certainly entertain you coming up and talking if you'd like to.
No, we're just here to answer questions, and I appreciate working with staff through this process so far.
Okay, thanks. So then, amongst commission?
I got a question for staff and for applicant. The driveway right now is shared with the dance studio there, correct?
Correct,
That's
yep.
the entrance?
Yep.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify on that. And then, do you see?
On top of that, not just the dance studio.
Yeah,
there's
all
a
the-
couple buildings that are there. Yep, with
all the
multiple
tenants.
users.
Do my dance lessons there. Is there going to be a loading dock there for semis, or what's the thought on that?
No, at this time, as in our narrative noted, the people that we're using are small operations that tend to use their own vehicles, small delivery trucks. So no, not expecting any semi trucks. The site's large enough, like any other standard industrial commercial site, to a truck to maneuver in there, but we're not expecting any to be there.
That's my, when I look at this real conceptually, that's my only concern on it right now is, nobody tells the semi trucks that you can't come in there, right? So they end up in there, and then is there enough room for them to turn around without having to back out on the 41 there?
If you think your fire truck drivers are good, you usually see these semi drivers.
All right, that's all I got.
Yeah, so when I see this type of product come through, it kind of makes me a little happy because I'm an industrial broker, and I like the project. There's a high demand for small space that's not easy to find. It's really cost prohibitive usually to develop things like this now. It's all these big box industrial buildings that, we work on. So this is great. I do think majority of these tenants, this is really small, like I would call this incubator space. We'll use box trucks or pick and pack and ship, or maybe it's like a plumber or a landscaper or someone that's two-man crew and they need stuff to store. So I'm not too concerned about semi-trucks, but I would voice the same concern as fire life safety with fire truck or some sort of, if there's a hazardous chemical or something gets spilled, or there needs to be some sort of larger truck that comes in. So that would be something to work on, figure out, prove to staff that that's fine. Like the development in general. I like what it serves its purpose and its need. And it looks good. It's a nice looking building.
Thank you.
I have a question. Staff noted needing to maintain access or allow access for the property owner to the north tell. Was that something that was known prior to the purchase of the property? Okay. Is that something that's, I guess, is that a requirement or a request? Because technically, I guess, where is that coming from?
I think it's purely coming from the physical limitations that exist on that property to the north. It's completely separated from the other portion of Tell today, and with the limitations of MnDOT's access requirements, we do see that as a conversation that's going to come up
But is
later.
that a requirement placed on this property owner for the use of their property?
Well, I think-
And the reason why, and really the bigger reason why I'm asking that is because, and it's kind of my second question, which is, when is the meeting with MnDOT for that access? Because when Costco came through, Treehouse was still open in existence. Now that's converting to something else, and then, oh yeah, then there's something else as well too. So it's a kind of a twofold question of, do they have to, and then what is going to happen with that entrance? And when are those meetings scheduled?
Yeah, and I'm not sure the schedule of those. I just know the conversations have been ongoing and they're still actively planning those together. We've also engaged MnDOT as a part of this project to give comments to that. We still haven't received that, but I'm assuming that will come out of it as well.
I think to your point,
Has
Commissioner
the
Olson,
meeting happened with the property owners since the beginning?
there have been multiple conversations with the property owners and
Since the
engaged with
beginning of March?
MnDOT. Excuse me?
Since the beginning of March?
I don't have the schedule and the time of when we've,
Well,
I don't want to misspeak.
Sure, I
I'm
understand.
not directly involved in all those discussions. What I can tell you is that there are ongoing discussions that are actively occurring. In fact, there was emails going back and forth today with the property owners to continue with that conversation.
Right.
So I know we are in the process of scheduling a meeting. I don't have those dates and
Okay.
times
No,
advertised.
Just asking.
But I mean, we are working with them, and this is, that access change and that discussion, decisions about that are all imminent. I think, as Liz is saying, MnDOT we have requested the review of this specific project. I think to your point about Tell to the north, this is probably a good opportunity to open the aperture of that discussion with them and have them opine about, Tell's access to the north and, what is the best configuration. I do think at this stage in the game, it's good planning to work with, this project to not preempt the ability of that, developable property to the north to gain access to 41.
But understanding what's required for that property to the north can have a play on the design that's going to come through at preliminary, assuming this continues through. So but that's the part where it's the making sure that that's nailed down so that they can design and utilize the property to the best they can based on what's known versus what's assumed.
Mm-hmm.
So
And I know the current property owner, Audrius here, they have contacts for Tell. I'm not sure if they've made any success with them. It's
yet.
been, I think,
We wanted to
difficult for
hear-
them to get a hold of them, but it's in their interest to, you know, have a conversation with them and really talk about that. I think it's kind of a twofold thing, not only an access thing, but also a grading thing for them to be able to have communication with them in terms of what happens there. And I guess we'll have to see what comes out of that, if anything.
Commissioner Olson, to answer your question, we have no problem extending our parking lot or our drive aisle to stub up against the tail property, no different than you doing a residential neighborhood, you having a residential street stubbing up to the next vacant property, just in case future needs require it. We have no problem providing that, and we'll have those conversations with TEL to see where they're at, though.
My last one, and this is just the easy one, is the water retention pond. I get the fact that they have to take care of the water, but does it have to be right there as you enter the property? And
We're showing it there because of just natural
Yeah,
elevation.
I saw the
slopes down that
elevation,
way.
I'm like,
It's graphic, we have not studied until what the required size is until we know what their hard surface is, have the discussions with city staff on what those calculations are, definitely with working with the slopes. So right now, we're putting it at the best known location during the current topography of the site.
Right.
And we'll work from it as we move forward.
like I said, as a person that's driven in that parking lot for the last 14 years, seeing a water retention pond right there as you drive through.
We hope to see it more as an amenity. I mean, we love to make
Right,
it
I mean,
decorative.
it's a matter
get
of
some-
how can we make it visibly attractive? but
Right,
it's
we love to put a
really-
berm around and put some landscaping around it, it's gonna be our front door.
Right.
So we hope to make it an amenity, especially with the have water, something we could make something creative as you enter our site.
Because yes, I did take dance lessons there.
There's no storage outside of things, right?
Correct.
Is there, look on the plan, is there like a little mezzanine option? Is that what I'm seeing, like as a dash, is there like are you doing like a little mezzanine storage inside each unit, like an upper area or no?
That has not been determined yet.
Okay. I thought I saw it on the plan when I was looking at it this afternoon, but I might have looked
Like
at it wrong.
above the bathroom areas?
Yeah, I
They
thought
said
there
that's all
was,
draft right now, so we really haven't honed down on what the final interior design of those buildings or how they'll be used.
This will be leased, it's not a condo, right?
Right.
okay. Okay. Any more questions or
Questions?
anything for the applicant?
It's a nice concept plan, something we can work with.
Yeah, I mean.
I agree.
Definitely something we've already built off of from the one down here, so
Yeah.
it should be fairly easy to help kind of make it their own, but use what we've already gone through as well, too.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval to the city council of the concept plan for 3740 Chestnut Street, subject to the following 33 conditions.
First by Urbanski, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Well, you beat you. Second by Olson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Thank you.
With that, 8A will receive the previous meeting minutes, and that does not need a motion, so we'll just hereby receive them. Received, they're magically received, and then just adjournment, but I guess quickly before that, is there anything you want to discuss or ask, questions, city? I have a quick question. What's going on with the bump?
The Target.
41
Pioneer
in
Trail and
here.
41.
Yeah, I mean, are
You
we
mean the
like,
lunch here?
is there,
recently.
is there like a water main
You
sinking?
can catch some
or
air on
like-
that.
It was probably a utility line that went in
Like, what's going
too
on?
shallow.
What's going on?
Yeah,
are we gonna have a mini-
actually, Commissioner Asen, given his employer, may be better positioned.
Are we gonna have a
to answer that question.
Minneapolis sinkhole? I mean, what's-
I've driven over it a number of times, and I think I may have grabbed some air
Yeah.
also, but I don't, honestly, I don't know. I don't know the specifics of what's going on other than
Is it a-
you know,
is
what
this
we see
because-
occurring all over the place with.
Is it a
with
county
winter.
road issue then, technically?
Excuse me?
Is it a county road issue?
I think that's state, isn't it?
So that'd be 41 where that's occurring. You know, there's the crossroad is a
Yeah.
county
Yeah.
road, so it's at the intersection.
No man's land, it's like Switzerland?
I
Not
hope
mine.
they're working together to fix it, I would presume.
It's happened many times where they bore a utility too shallow,
Yeah,
and
that's
they
what it looks
force
like.
water in, or a fluid in, and it penetrates the surrounding ground, and then when it freezes, it bubbles up.
Yeah. I just want to know the bump, and then, is Costco still, are they, I can't tell from looking from the road, there's a lot of site work and grading and utilities and pipes going in on the townhome side. Is Costco still moving forward? Are they doing their stuff? I just can't see it from, looks like the same progress.
Yeah, that project continues to move forward. I know on the permitting side, we continue to see things
Coming through?
from all the players involved there.
Okay.
And we are working with them. So, yep. I think now that, you know, things have melted and we've had, you know, I guess we flip the switch to summer suddenly, but I expect you're gonna start seeing a little bit more visible change out there shortly.
Yeah, and they're still shooting for early '24, correct?
That is
Spring.
Costco's.
Yeah.
Spring of '24.
I'm worried about, I'm.
I know what your concern is.
I grow tired of driving to Eden Prairie all the way
Right,
into
right.
town, as I like to call it. I like to stay right here in my quaint little Chaska.
Yes. It'll be nice.
Have they finished your meetings with MinDOT on that yet?
So that's the roundabout project. The contractor is working towards implementation of that. I know they've had some, meetings, you know, called neighborhood meetings with the business community up there. Some of that has initiated. There's some utility relocations that are actively happening, including involving Chaska Electric, because I know is working out there. So you're kind of seeing some of that ancillary stuff happening, before, you know, you're gonna see the closure happen. That kind of stuff as we get into summer. That project will occur this year.
Yeah.
Is there anything we can do for parking restrictions for the apartment building north of the railroad tracks on Clover Ridge?
Oh, with the development going on?
In reference to what parking?
The contractors'
Oh,
vehicles?
yeah, we continue to work with them.
It's tight.
The objective is for them to ideally be concentrating their activity on their construction site. Trying to be reasonable, working with them. And
Maybe now that
it's an ongoing discussion.
maybe now that we've got summer conditions coming up, maybe they can get on the site.
Once it dries out.
We continue to
Dries out a little
encourage
bit, yep.
that for them. Yep.
There's just a lot going on at once.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot going on, and when they park on both sides,
Mm-hmm.
you can't get through.
Yep.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Yep, if anyone wants to make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Can I make a motion? That was your motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Oh, no, he Purdy got it this time. He's in there. We got a first by Bansky, second by Purdy. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned.